All right. Sorry I was running a little late tonight. Just getting some things situated. And happy Friday evening to everybody that's here. So tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about old code and what do you do to figure out old code that you've probably inherited from somebody that inherited it. Um, have you ever looked at some old code and thought, who in the world wrote this? Right. And then realized it was you maybe 6 months, a year ago. Yeah. I've definitely been there. And if you haven't been there yet, you will definitely be there at some point too, as aspiring data engineers out there. So tonight we're going to really be diving into some of the painful and hilarious and really the unavoidable reality that you're going to have to decipher old code at some point, whether it's legacy code from a past teammate that it's long since been gone, um, or it is your own late night masterpiece that now looks like just ancient hieroglyphics. Um, those are the things that we're going to cover, how to handle that and how to kind of mitigate any potential um, future tech debt because of it. So tonight we're going to talk about my methods for untangling some of that mess, some of that unreadable code that you're going to run into. We're going to talk about some tools and strategies to really make sense of it. And we're going to talk about how to avoid writing future use worst nightmare when it comes to your pipelines and your ETL code. So, I've said this before, but refactoring old SQL is really like translating some of the ancient, like Dead Sea Scrolls, except really the ancient scribe is you from last year, right? I can't tell you how many times there's nothing more humbling and more inspiring than looking back at your code from a year, 2 years, 5 years ago, and seeing two things. One, you always look at it and think, man, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And, the positive way to spin it is how much you've grown since that point, right? How much you've learned, how much you've changed since you wrote that code a year ago, 5 years ago. So let's talk a little bit about some of the common struggles that you may come across in refactoring old code. When you come into a new position, inevitably there is a ton of code that's already there, and you're going to have to refactor stuff. Something's going to change, something's going to happen. You're going to have to dig into it and figure it out. So here's some of the common struggles. Um, and and some of the symptoms of unreadable code. Number one thing, there is almost never any comments in code, especially SQL code. We're all just bad about commenting our SQL code. If you do run into comments, then you're one of the lucky people that experienced somebody that was awesome at documenting. Next piece is overly complex logic. People get in there and people come up with some crazy, wild workarounds that, they got it to work, but maybe not the most elegant way. And so people come up with some of the most crazy workarounds. And so it can be overly complex, nested subqueries and CTEs, really unnecessary joins that may be slowing down the code and may be hard to really untangle and decipher. So the next piece that I've run into a lot before, hard-coded business logic in SQL code, in ETL processes, and magic number things that I call magic numbers, right? You get some where statement that says where status equals 3, and you're like, what the heck is 3? What does that mean? And there's no documentation, no notes to tell you what that is. And so it's hard to tell sometimes if business logic is still valid. It's hard to tell if business logic was correct to begin with, and maybe the business has been using it for years and they just don't know any better. So This next piece, missing documentation or context. What was this and what was it ever meant to do, right? I mean, sometimes it's really hard to figure out why a specific piece of join criteria may have been put in or used, why a left join was used instead of an inner join, or even vice versa, depending on the situation. Um, and you can't go back in time and figure that out. And you can't often go back to the original writer and figure it out. And even if you could, would they remember? So this last one, overuse of clever tricks. Clever does not always mean maintainable, right? So, one of the posts that I put on LinkedIn this week was about some, quirky, clever tricks about using where 1 = 1 and where 1 = 0 in a video that I put out earlier in the week. And that's a clever trick. That's a trick that you see a lot in Oracle. So it's a trick that I've migrated into other systems and used before. So where 1 = 1 and where 1 = 0 are, definitely have their place, but be sure that you're documenting that. Be sure you're documenting why you used it, what that piece of code, what that SQL statement's doing. So for those of you that are here, which I think is nobody, but if anybody is here, or if you're watching after it's already said and done and you're not live anymore, let me know down in the comments. Let me know in the chat, what's the worst piece of code that you have ever had to decipher? I'd love to hear these stories. They're super interesting. We all run into them. So let me know down in the chat. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that people say and people see is, this code was clearly written at 2 a.m. With an energy drink in one hand and and a shot of vodka in the other, right? And it just happens. We're up at 2-3 a.m. and writing code to try to get something out and coming up with some creative solutions and something crazy and in a hurry and don't document. So it's yeah. So again, for those of you that are out there, let me know that you're here. Let me know where you're from, and tell me down in the chat what's some crazy code that you've had to decipher and try to untangle before. I'd love to hear those stories. So the secret business logic step before jumping into code, one of the biggest things, there's a handful of things that we're going to go through tonight that you should do and could do in order to untangle all this mess of inherited code and inherited projects that you receive as you move through your career. But one of the biggest things that people don't think about is, even if the person that wrote it is no longer around, then oftentimes there are business users that still use it and understand why the business logic was in place. I inherited a 4,500 line SQL script that did all the transformations for an ETL process before, and Andy, the person that wrote it had long since gone from the business. I inherited it from somebody that inherited it, and there was a lot of hard-coded business logic in it, and the only way that I was able to figure out what the business logic was for was to work with our marketing team, this guy from our marketing team, Mark Beasley, and he knew, like, intimately what each of those pieces were for and why those different at-bats were coded that way and why we excluded certain categories and why we included other categories. And so he was able to walk me through a lot of that business logic and why we did it. And then I was able to turn around and take those discussions and identify, do we still need some of that business logic? Does it need to be revised? Does it need to be removed? And so, that really helped me to be able to refactor that, that code. So that's one of my biggest recommendations when you're trying to refactor old code. Don't dismiss the fact that just because the original programmer or original engineer that wrote the code isn't there anymore that nobody knows. It may very well be that their business users, uh, your marketing team, your sales team, whoever uses those reports, the end data for those reports, they often will know, at least have some type of understanding of what the business logic is and why it's being used. Um, so, but then it opens up that door for that conversation. Is this logic even needed anymore? Is it still being used in reporting or in workflows? Could this be replaced with something that is a little bit more table driven? And that's a little bit more on the engineering and architecture side of, can we pull this out of the hard coding and put it into a table so that we could use that table to drive that metric calculation? Um, so be sure that you talk to your report users and your business analysts and your business users so that you could get them to help you understand and involve them in that process. Uh, Not only will it help you understand the business logic, but it will help to increase their buy-in for the changes that you do implement. Um, so those are the big questions. Are these hard-coded business rules still valid? Um, has it changed? Do we need to update it? And would moving to a parameter table make this easier to maintain, not only for not only for you, but for the business users? If you could make it table driven, then you could even, whether you build it or get somebody else to build it, create a front end, a power app where they could put in their own business metrics and own calculations. And based on that table driven metric, then they could see that information in reports. So there's ways to do that. That's a great opportunity as you're refactoring to get that business logic out of the code and into something that's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more table driven. Yeah, again, here's another real world example. Once I had found this query that we filtered out all of these customers where status equaled 7, and there's nothing in the code that told me what status equals 7 meant, right? And that there wasn't a table that explained what those status codes were. And so I had to work with the business to understand, okay, what's status code 7? And they were able to tell me that status code 7 were students, and they were students that had signed up to get some type of white paper. And so we had excluded them from the marketing calculations. And so, it's important to, oh, awesome. Thank you for joining. Thank you for jumping on. Alex, thanks, man. Hey guys, how are y'all doing tonight? Happy Friday. Um, so anyway, yeah. So you run into those situations where the business will understand what that code was for, even though that programmer and that data engineer may be long gone. A comment, if you run into even comments that they'll just say like to do, right? You see those to do comments, especially from programmers or programmers that turn data engineers, you see just to do. And so they get left in there, and then the to do never happens, right? Or fix later, or please don't touch, don't change this. Those are the types of types of comments that you see in there. You never see anything. Very rarely do you see anything super useful. So I always try to preach, the importance of documenting your code, especially workarounds and kind of the quirky fixes that you implement. Let me know down in the comments, for those of you that aren't driving and listening, have you ever found some business logic in code that was completely outdated and the business had continued to use and continued to make assumptions off of? And how did you have to address that? I mean, that's a big deal, right? And it happens. I've run into it. So I'd love to know those. I'd love to hear those stories. They're super interesting, and we get to all learn from each other as to how to deal with those situations. Sometimes you have to kind of deal with those situations with kind of kid gloves. So next, we're going to talk about some strategies for deciphering old code that I use and have used. I've been doing this for 25 years. I've come up with kind of my own methods over time and different tools and things that I use. But you know, one of the biggest things is to understand the big picture first. What does the code do? Reverse engineer everything from the report all the way back to the source, right? Try to get what that whole piece looks like if you have the time. Sometimes you don't have the time and you just have to dig in and try to figure it out quick. But when you get a project and you get a chance to take that time, it's important to understand the full scope of what it is that that piece of code does, to really understand how you need to adjust it and how you can make it more dynamic and more maintainable going forward. So again, what does that code do? Where is it used? What other processes may be looking at that code or that data? Um, check if you could find old tickets, whether it be in Jira or ADO or some other ticketing tool that you may be using, Remedy. Find an old ticket, project notes, whatever you could if you could dig any of that up, and then take that information out of those ticketing tools and put it into the code. Because let me tell you, ticketing systems come and go. You don't know when that ticketing system's going to change for when you're going to migrate from Jira to ADO or to some other tool, right? Remedy was an old tool that some IT groups used that has really long since gone by the wayside, and people have migrated to other tools. And sometimes that documentation is just gone forever, especially if it's something that's been done 3, 4, even, I've run into code that's still in production from 15 years prior. So especially dealing with some Oracle stuff. I mean, some custom Oracle stuff that was written 15, even, Lord, I ran into something that was written in 97 once. And there was join criteria and where statements. So when you see something like that, it's old. Um, so again, anything that you could take out of ticketing systems and put it into code that's pertinent. Documentation is really, it's like a rare mythical creature. Everybody talks about it, but nobody actually sees it. So it's like those unicorns. So go out there, grab and document whatever you can. All right. So next piece, look for entry and exit points. See, again, understand where the data is coming from and how it's coming into the transaction, into the transformation, and where it's going to. Is it being passed off to another process? Is it being just automatically put into a production table? Where is that data coming and going to? Coming from and going to? So understand, again, where the inputs are, what tables it's being used, parameters that may be feeding into that process. Understand that whole scope, and then where it's going. Is it going to, again, a production table? Is it being fed to a service bus message? Is it going to some type of API response? Understand what that full scope is. The next thing that I do, once you understand really that full scope of what's going on there, I take out the pieces that I'm struggling with, right? That I'm looking at and I'm like, I don't know what this subquery is doing. What is the benefit of the subquery? So I'll take out and run that individual subquery by itself and kind of take out the pieces as small chunks as I can to understand what it's actually doing, what the benefit is of it, if I can't figure it out just by reading it. A lot of times with SQL, you can figure it out by reading it. And for those of us that have been working in Python for a long time, a lot of that kind of stuff, we could figure it out by reading it, but it sometimes you have to run it to figure out what is this actually doing, especially if you're not familiar with the data, with your data warehouse and that that specific schema. So that's a big piece that you could do as you're refactoring that code. And again, you'll find stuff that you're like, maybe at some point this was useful, but it's not anymore. You may find join criteria that it's joining on stuff, and maybe there's an inner join and that table's not being populated anymore because you changed tables. And again, nobody really did a good job of researching what the ins and outs were of what that table did to understand that it was going to impact this piece as well. And maybe that's why you're even looking at it. So, so understanding all that is important. And sometimes you have to take stuff out chunk by chunk. All right. So once you do all that, you have a good understanding of the code, you understand what all the pieces are doing. Go back again, make sure that you're documenting, format and beautify the code, right? Whether you are using an extension that you've installed into Azure Data Studio or into Notebook++ or VS Code, format your SQL, make sure that it is pretty, right? You prettify, there's those pretty code extensions, right? For especially for like JSON and SQL and all that, or whatever your specific extension is that you love. If there is a great SQL formatter that you love, I'd love to know what it is, because there's a ton out there, several out there, and I'm always looking for one that works better, and see what everybody else uses. But anyways, so format and beautify the code. Again, SQL formatters and VS Code prettifiers are great. Indent properly, remove unnecessary white space, make sure that, one of the common things, and this is a big argument, right? Put your commas on the left, put each field on a separate line, make sure that your from is on one level, and I like to indent my on statements, right? My join criteria, so that I could easily see, okay, this is where all my joins are as I look down through there. Especially for more complex join state, if you have multiple join criterias, if you follow kind of the if you follow some of the newer methodology where you're doing it in your ETL process and your ELT processes, you're creating some type of field that's a composite key of multiple fields that you're using as the primary key, then hopefully your join criteria is not as complex. But there's definitely still methodologies and plenty of models out there where there's pretty complex join criteria. So hey, SQL Fluff is my go-to SQL formatter. Awesome. I've not looked at that. I'm gonna have to check that out. Thanks. So okay. So yeah. So again, format, beautify your code. Grab some. Check out this SQL Fluff extension. I'm gonna go out and check it probably after the video. So indent properly, remove unnecessary white space. Next piece, rename your variables and add comments as you go. Again, I will preach document. It is I can't preach enough. Now, over documentation, people aren't going to read, right? Make it TLDR, make it short, concise, pertinent, in the right location that aligns with the part that you're explaining, and document as needed. But over documentation is bad. No documentation is worse. So I would much rather see over documentation than no documentation. So next piece, rename variables. Change things like, I see so many times where people have aliased tables as A, B, and C, and they don't go back, before they put it into production and alias those tables as with something that is a little bit more logical and maintainable and readable, right? A, B, and C is great for as you're doing your testing and things like that. T1, you see T1, T2, T3. And one of my personal pet peeves, and some people love this, order buys, not order buys, but group buys, where it just says group by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 instead of actually calling out the field names. Drives me nuts to see that. And I go in there and change that every time. It doesn't take you a minute, especially if you've done a good job of aliasing your tables. You've done a good job of using those aliases in your field names in your query. Copy and paste those, drop out the stuff that's aggregated, and you've got your group by. Please don't use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could use it. It works. There are plenty of things that work out there that probably shouldn't be used and are being used. So again, you see all this stuff in production. Clean those things up, especially when you get a chance to refactor them. And so that, again, I promise you, 6 months from now are going to thank yourself for doing this now. Especially if you're looking at it 18 months, 2 years down the line, you're not going to have a clue as to what you did at this point today, 2 years from now. All right. Again, one of the things I talked about a little bit ago, reverse engineer the logic, run the smaller chunks, verify the results, make sure it works, especially after you've renamed things, after you have made things more readable. Sometimes you accidentally drop something out that you need. Make sure the results are the same as what your results were, if that's what you're expecting. Debug with print statements. You could use your top X, or limit, depending on which SQL engine you're looking at, whether you need to use top or limit so that you're not, just spinning a bunch of resources. Or spending, if you're in Snowflake or Databricks or something, you're not spending a bunch of compute. Try to limit use the limit or the top to just get your result at the handful of results, so that you could see that your calculations, your aggregations are still working as expected. And then refactor where possible. Simplify some of your convoluted joins, simplify your loops, unnecessary CTEs, break some of your longer queries up into modular pieces, make things more readable, make things more dynamic and portable, and try to simplify things. Awesome. Thank you. And so yeah, those are my things. And my final suggestion, and this one's new. Obviously, when you hear it, it's going to be something much newer than the rest of it. The rest of them kind of are timeless, right? But this one is new school. Use AI tools. Now, my warning with using AI, I have multiple warnings with using AI tools. You use DeepSeek. I've played a little bit with DeepSeek this week. It works pretty well. ChatGPT, Copilot, whatever flavor of AI that you like, use those tools. That's what they're there for. That's what they've been created for. They've been created for a lot more things, but they're good for this, especially for evaluating coding. Keeping in mind a handful of things. Biggest thing, don't put anything that's proprietary in any of those AI tools. Some companies have internal AIs that are firewalled off from the rest of the world. If you've been given the green light to do whatever in those systems, then by all means. At AT&T, we had an internal AI that was within our firewall, and we could use it for those things. But that's not the case with just general ChatGPT or DeepSeek. You be sure that you strip out anything that's proprietary, strip out anything that is, maybe a secret or some type of, accidentally put API. I've seen people accidentally put API keys where they don't belong on Git or in ChatGPT. Strip any of that stuff out. I've seen people post that stuff on Stack Exchange with credentials, with API keys. Strip all that stuff out before you use any of those tools. With AI tools, you also have, like I just mentioned, Stack Exchange. That's my old school thing that we used, right? Stack Exchange, I don't know if it gets used as much anymore, but you use Stack Exchange, you often get, for better or for worse, you often get some type of response. They may straight up call you an idiot on Stack Exchange, but they're not nearly as friendly as some of the other groups. You could put stuff on here. Bulbasaur, I'll get to that question here in a second. That's a great question. Uh, Analysts like to ask me that question. Okay, so let me run through. Oh, let me run through the rest of my warning about AI real quick. Rest of my warning about AI: when you get a result, verify it. Make sure that make sure it works. Confirm that it works the way that you expect it to work and the way that you need it to work before you implement it in any type of production environment. So those are my big warnings about AI. Don't put anything proprietary. Don't put any secrets or anything like that in there. And confirm that it's accurate. Confirm that it does what you want it to do. All right. I'm going to answer Bulbasaur's questions here real quick. Okay, my opinion on CTEs versus creating some type of temporary intermediate tables or temporary tables. I think that there's place for both. CTEs obviously have a place, especially when you have like a subquery that you're maybe using a few times within a very complex query. So that's definitely a great use case for CTEs. Pull that subquery out, create a CTE. That way it's just running that part once, and then you could reuse it, right? And it's not so many table scans. It's not so much reuse of compute. Intermediate tables, it serves very similar purpose. There's definitely an advantage to you having a temp table or intermediate table where you're actually pulling the data and storing it in a table on your server, and then you could reuse it even in sequence in additional SQL statements that may be outside of that specific instance. So there's definitely a use case for both. I have a preference of CTEs, especially if you're doing stuff within the same kind of execution event. And then intermediate tables for maybe a little bit more complex things where you're having to run multiple execution events to do several things, and you may need that data over and over again in separate execution events. So that's my opinion on CTEs versus temp tables. They're always running models locally. Yeah, GPT for all soon. Yes, absolutely. Run stuff locally. Again, make sure that you're firewalled off. Make sure that you're running it locally on your computer. Make sure that it's secure. But that's an awesome point. That's an awesome point. Thank you for bringing that up. There's always that. And to that point, again, we have DeepSeek this week, right? That's come out really by storm and been in a lot of things. And so DeepSeek has, you could run that locally, right? You could pull that down and run that locally. And there's ways to do that. And then again, make sure that you're firewalled off, but you could do that. So great, Bulbasaur, thanks. All right, moving along. Preventing this nightmare in the future, preventing this headache of all these different things that you run into in the future, so that the next time you have to refactor this code or make a change, then you don't have to go through all this research and pain again, and you could kind of speed up your process. So best practices for writing maintainable, reusable code. Use meaningful variables. Number one, right? No more ABC, T1, T2, T3. No more putting group by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Don't do those things, please. Create variables, create aliases that make sense the first time you do it, and then you don't have to worry about it as you go back through. You'll know what it is 6 months, 2 years from now. Write clear comments and document any assumptions. Document why you've hard-coded something document why you've used a specific workaround and why you didn't use the normal process that maybe your team uses for a certain situation. Um, so that the next person that looks at it, so that when you look at it 6 months, 2 years from now, then you'll know what's going on. You'll remember what's going on. And I promise you, even if you think right now, I'm never going to forget this, I've gone through so much pain, I promise that if when you have to look at that 2.5 years from now and you've not looked at it in 2.5 years because it's run great, because you've done such an awesome job, but now there's a change, you're not going to remember why that was. No matter how much you think right now you're going to remember, you're not going to remember. Um, okay, avoid super deep nesting. When you've nested something, I've seen this 5 and 6 nests deep. Man, figure out a different way to do it. All right, it just just because it works. Again, I said this a little bit ago, but just because it works doesn't mean that it's good practice, it's good code, or that it's efficient. Find a different way to do it, whether that be pulling stuff out into uh, views so that you don't have so much nesting going on, so that the future people could step through those different views, whether it be, again, pulling stuff out into CTEs, temp tables. Don't nest things. If you get down to 3 nests deep and you need to go another nest, you probably need to go back and pull something out and do a CTE or a temp table. All right, next piece, version control. Please, if even in SQL Server, try to use version control. To find a way to do version control. For those of you that may be using SSIS packages still, there's some built-in version control that occurs that you could use within SQL Server, within that SSIS environment. But put stuff into Git. There is nothing wrong with using VS Code, writing out your SQL, pushing stuff to Git, and using Git commits, and putting your SQL in Git as well. I know that there are plenty of data engineering groups that probably don't do that don't spend a whole lot of time doing version control for their SQL scripts. But I'm telling you, it is a lifesaver when it comes down to having to figure out, crap, I accidentally removed something and now it's gone, right? So being able to recover that and roll back a couple of commits is really a huge lifesaver. Has been a huge lifesaver for me. So again, future, that's one of those things that future you is going to thank you for doing. Write tests. Write out the tests that you do to make sure that your code, your SQL statement is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Write out the tests that you performed, write out the tests that you're going to perform, write out the results of those tests, so that if somebody else has to come back and figure out why something was done a certain way, they get to see that you tested it at the time, it was coming out the way it was expected to, and maybe something has changed and now it's not anymore. Yes. I'll get to that in a second. But yes, absolutely. Okay, a handful of things not to do when you're to make things a little bit more readable. Don't assume that you're going to get a chance to clean this up later. Don't assume that something is a one-time run. Don't assume that you're going to get a chance to take care of that tech debt and clean it up later. It's not going to happen. Some other emergency, some other situation, some other project's going to come up that you have to tackle now, and you're not going to have time. That later is not ever going to come. So keep it clean now. Take the time to do it right now. I promise you, the time that you take now to do it right is going to pay dividends 6 months, 2 years from now. Don't copy and paste without understanding. Don't go out to Stack Exchange. Don't go out to ChatGPT, get an answer, just blindly copy and paste it in there without taking the time to understand what that code is doing, for multiple reasons. If you're on a team and you have a PR, they're going to ask you about it, right? They're going to ask you, hey, what does this do? And you're going to be like, I don't know, I got it from Stack Exchange, or you don't want to walk into that room and tell them, I don't know, ChatGPT said to use it, right? Understand intimately what you're doing so that you could explain it to somebody else. If you don't feel comfortable explaining it to your boss, then you need to research it more and figure it out. So don't copy and paste without understanding. And please do not hard code values without providing the proper context. Again, where status equals 3 doesn't help anybody 6 months from now. Nobody's going to know what that is. Try to be descriptive in your where criteria. Try to be, and if you can't be, if it is something that's going to be where status equals 3, be sure that you're documenting what 3 is. So that future use, so that the next person that has to look at it doesn't have to go through the excruciating pain of figuring out what that means. All right, your turn. Bulbasaur. Okay, what do you think about DBT? Is it worth learning? Absolutely. DBT is a great tool. I see it on a ton of job recs. It's definitely being used out there. It integrates well with other systems, with other tools. You could use it with Fabric. And for those of you that haven't gotten into Fabric lately, that whether you got into Fabric a year ago and you thought it was just junk, or you just haven't gotten a chance to get into Fabric, revisit Fabric if you visited a year ago and haven't since. And if you haven't gotten a chance, go out and try to get into Fabric and spin up that resource and play with it. But DBT integrates well with Fabric, integrates with Databricks, integrates with a bunch of other tools, and will take care of a lot of that heavy lifting for some of the basic transformations that you may need to do. But yeah, to spend some time with DBT. It's worth learning. Not every business uses it. There are plenty of businesses out there that still don't use it, whether that be because they feel like that they have a senior enough data engineering group that they don't need that help at that time saving, or they just don't want to take the time to learn DBT. It's something that you could potentially bring to a business and add value. So yeah, I think it'll help to set you apart if you do take some time to learn DBT. All right. Tell me, for those of you that are out there, tell me what's one habit that you're going to start doing today to make your future code easier to read. For me, early on, I just wrote everything just like a paragraph and just line after line. And, eventually I had a boss. The first several bosses I had just thought everything I did was magic, and I was the data guy, and I could make things happen, and they could care less what it looked like. And then finally I had a boss that was like, what is this? What are you doing to me? And he was like, you need to learn how to format. And so go out. If you don't know, that was my big thing. My first big thing early on, learning how to format is super important. Learn how to format consistently, use that methodology consistently, getting a good method and a good habit up front. Again, there's a big argument about, do you put the comma at the beginning? Do you put the comma at the end? Put the comment at the beginning, a whole lot easier to comment out. And indent, use proper indentation in your SQL. These are things that with SQL, it's not required in order for it to run, but man, it makes your life, makes another person's life that has to read your SQL statement a whole lot easier when they have to look at it. So let me know what are some of your good habits that you currently practice when you're writing code, when you're writing SQL or Python or whatever the case might be. But yeah, if if you think your code is self-explanatory now, try reading it 6 months when you're in a rush and you've got a VP breathing over your shoulder trying to get data. I promise you that your code is not nearly as readable as you think it is. There's always a VP or a C-suite person breathing down your neck for some data. So, all right. So now I've spent 45 minutes running my mouth. Here's your opportunity. Bulbasaur's done a great job asking questions. I love taking this time to hear what your thoughts are, to hear what your questions are. Uh, you know, we've had we had a SQL formatter that I'm going to go out and take a look at, the SQL Fluff, that I've not used before. Super excited about a new extension that I might install and take a look at. And but let me know what extensions that you love to help you to code more efficiently, more quickly, to make sure that you're documenting. Let me know what your bad habits are that you formed that you know are not great and you need to get rid of. And then, for those of you that have been here and have been around for a while, you know that at this point in the show, in the live stream, any questions are I'm open to any questions. Let me know what you got. Whether that be, I did a video earlier this week, yesterday, on interview questions. Had some great interview, talked through kind of a mock interview and asked you all to put in there what your answers were. Had a video on where 1 = 1 and where 1 = 0, right? And the usefulness and practical use for that. So plenty of things out there going on. DeepSeek came out with a storm this week, really started blowing stuff away. NVIDIA stock has plummeted. And my personal opinion on that is that it's a great time to buy NVIDIA stock because it will rebound. Because the market will eventually figure out that having a more efficient AI tool is just going to increase usage of AI. But that's my personal opinion. Don't take that to the bank or anything. I'm going to buy NVIDIA stock, but my personal opinion. And I'll say that I've tried out DeepSeek just for some brainstorming stuff and to check it out and see what it's like, and it's comparable to ChatGPT. It is quick. I mean, for what it is, it's quick. There's definitely limitations. My personal experience just playing around with it and comparing it to like ChatGPT, even to 4.0 or to 4.0 compared to DeepSeek right now. My opinion is that ChatGPT still has some functionality, and especially Gemini still has some functionality that DeepSeek just doesn't have. DeepSeek does answer super quick in comparison to some of the thoughtfulness that happens with ChatGPT and Gemini, but yeah, that's my experience, at least, kind of using those tools for anybody that may be wondering what it's like to use DeepSeek. All right. So again, any questions, let me know in the chat. Really love to have these conversations with you all on Friday nights, and usually get some pretty good interactive conversation. Kind of quiet tonight. There's been a bunch of people pop in and out. I know Friday nights people are doing other things probably, but yeah. So if nobody has any questions, I'll jump off. But again, I love to have these conversations. Let me know how your week's been. Let me know what questions you may have. For those of you that may be working on your DP 700 for your Fabric Data Engineer exam, let me know how that's going. Is there anybody out there that's trying to wrap up their 203 exam? I'm just curious. Anybody's still trying to get that in before the end of March? You got 7 weeks. Time's going by. Can't believe it's the end of January already. Cool. Well, everybody's gone. All right. Well, in that case, it is right at 11 o'clock here, or 10:59. If anybody has any last questions, let me know. Yeah, if anybody has any questions about data engineering, about what we talked about tonight, um, whether it be interview questions, whether it be career questions, how to format your resume, I'm going to be doing a video for next week on the 5 major tools that you need to be sure that you're investing time in 2025 as you're moving into data engineering career. Hope to get that out Monday, and then probably will follow up with another video on some more advanced SQL stuff later in the week. Maybe procedures. I also want to talk about the 10 Azure Data Studio extensions that I use. So I'm probably going to try to get that out in the next couple of weeks. And then I did a poll, right? I did a poll on our community page on kind of what is interesting to you. There's a few things that I've personally got, a few projects I personally have going. I'm working on trying to create a AI agent that you can just give it a CSV or a file location, and it will read the schema of that file and output and go ahead and create your staging table in your SQL server, in whatever your chosen server is, and will import that data and go ahead and create all of your your ETL script in Python, and then give you the full Python script and have created that table and imported that data already into a staging schema. So kind of working on that. That's my agent that I want to work on and create, where I could just tell it, hey, here's the file, go out, and this is a new implementation. Create all that for me. So that I'm working on that agent. That's something that I want to create and demo over the next few weeks. Hopefully I could get it done. So trying to figure out practical ways to use AI agents in data engineering. There's going to be plenty of those this year, I think. So yeah, again, any questions, let me know in the chat. We often kind of branch off into all kinds of different things in here. I have this question up on the screen. What's the worst variable name or SQL query you've ever seen? There are some crazy SQL names or variable names out there. People don't think about the acronyms that they create sometimes, or the variable names that they create sometimes, and so it's pretty entertaining sometimes. But I'd love to know down in the comments if you've run into any types of those situations. But yeah. Well, it's pretty quiet tonight, so I'm going to let you all go. Next week, Nathan's going to jump on with me on Friday, and we're going to talk about his 3-hour-long grueling data engineering interview that he went through, and he's going to share his insights on some recent practical interview experience that he's had. Super excited about Nathan jumping on with me next Friday, and really look forward to that. Hope you all can join us again next Friday for that, and have a wonderful week. And hey, welcome back. How's it going? I love it when always super excited to see people jump on that have been with me for a while and rejoin us. We have a handful of people that often jump on Friday nights, so super excited to see y'all. Thanks for jumping on. Thanks for letting me know you're here. That's my favorite thing. For those of you that don't know, that haven't done live streams before yourself, unless you make a comment, I don't know who's here. Like, I have indicator that tells me that 6 people are on or that 20 people are on or whatever the case may be. But I don't know who's here unless you let me know that you're here. So I love it when you say hi. So thanks. Welcome back. I love our growing community. Super excited. We are at 1,370 people. Hopefully, 1,374 people as of right this moment. Super excited about our new couple of people that have joined since we started this live stream. If you are new to the channel over the last couple weeks, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to say hi and to get your feedback on why you joined. For those of you that are on, that are part of our channel, maybe you're new, maybe you don't know. We do these at 10 p.m. on Friday evenings, at 10 p.m. Eastern Friday evening, and last semester was stressful, man. I'm sorry. That sucked. If you're, if you ever have questions on things, you could always reach out. Shoot me an email if you ever run into issues with your classes that are SQL or Python or data engineering related. I'm happy to help. So for those of you that are on, let me know down in the chat. Are you new? Have you been here have you been part of our community for a while? Let me know. For those of you that are new, let me know why you joined. What struck a chord with you? What are you here to learn more of? It helps me to understand what I can create for you, and it helps me to to get to know you all better. I love having these live streams because I get to interact with you all. So, and I love it when you jump on. So, thank you. One of the super exciting things to me too is that so many people are from all around the world, and I love understanding. Like, I have a mentee that she lives in Africa, she's in Kenya, and she she gives me information about what the job market's like in Kenya. I have a couple people from the US that I'm mentoring. I have a guy from Australia that we did the live stream on a few weeks back, and having that interaction with people from around the world is really amazing and really gives us, me, and I try to share with you all, those insights as to what our profession's like, not just here, but around the world. Is it similar? Is it different? A lot of times it is very similar. We run into the same types of issues. We use the same similar tools. Some parts of the country still have more people that are on-prem. Whether that be because of security concerns, whether that be because of rules and regulations, whether that be because of cost. So having that insight from around the world, what that environment's like, that data engineering environment's like, is really interesting. Friday night, Campbell night. Woo! Yeah. That's awesome, man. So I love having these conversations. I try to share everything with you all, and we do have the oh my gosh, I just forgot what it's called. What is this thing? Oh, Discord. We do have the Discord channel. If you want to jump on the Discord channel and always you'd ask questions there. But we have a Discord group. I'm so glad that you came tonight. So we have the Discord group. We have the website, gambledataengineering.com. I've recently kind of revamped it and split it up into kind of a business side and a aspiring data engineer side, so that you could be a little bit more focused in what you're looking at, and trying to kind of get the Discord to be a little bit more interactive, trying to get people on there and use it. So yeah. All right. Well, does anybody have anything else that they want to ask me? Even if you just jumped on, even if you just got here, any question at all that you may be curious about, whether it be, again, interviewing a specific SQL question, a specific Python scenario that you've run into that you need help with, happy to help out live. Uh, we could break out a little VS Code and walk through stuff if you want. Break out a little Azure Data Studio or whatever the case may be, little Databricks. Let me know what questions you've got. Other than that, again, like I said, they've been doing this for those of you that don't know. Maybe you want to know, maybe you don't. I've been doing data engineering in some form since 2000. So for 25 years now. And started out with DTS packages and crystal reports, pulling stuff from Documentum and pulling stuff from Visual Fox Pro and and from a program called Meridian Terminal Emulator that had our call center stats in it, and pulling that data into SQL Server and then creating reports via crystal reports, eventually kind of migrated into SSRS and then into some other tools as time went on, but definitely have a wide scope of older technology. AS400, which is sometimes called iSeries. When I worked for a company called Denso, have definitely some horror stories too. So, all right, I'm looking for a data engineering internship. Is it hard to get? It is hard to get. Data engineering internships are hard to get. Usually, I think what we talked a little bit earlier, a little bit before about this, but usually your school will have some type of resource or some type of partnership with some businesses that will help you get into an internship. When I worked at Cellular Sales, they every quarter, every semester, they had a new intern. Not specifically for data engineering, but they often were doing BI analyst type jobs. But that at least gets your foot in the door, gets you some practical experience that you put on a resume. But data engineering internships can be hard. The ones that do open up are super competitive. The way that you can separate yourself from the crowd in those situations are because everybody has similar experience when you go through a natural progression that way, and you're going to a brick and mortar school or an online school. The biggest thing that you could do to differentiate yourself is to have great communication skills. Being able to explain things in an easy to understand manner to a non-technical audience, being able to ask questions, being able to really dig in and understand why things work or don't work. That's how you separate yourself out from the crowd in those situations. So communication skills are super important as a fresher trying to get, whether you're trying to get an internship or your first role. Great question. Awesome question. What other questions do y'all have tonight? I love answering these questions, love hearing what's going on for you all, and so I could help best I can. That's why I do this. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, it is 11:15. Thank you all. Oh, what's resume tips or roast on next stream? Okay. Hey, for those of you that don't currently follow me on LinkedIn, I did a post on a roast of fresher data engineers. I'm gonna pull it up and show you. And and I'll tell you that there's There's another woman out there that she does SQL training for data, and I can never remember her name. Jess Ramos. Um, she's awesome. If you don't follow her on LinkedIn or Instagram, but she's great. But she had posted something doing a roast on data analysts. So I took it. And I did a similar thing, and she had asked ChatGPT to roast the data analyst, and so I took it and said, "Hey, roast fresher data engineers," and it did not disappoint. It really. I'm pulling it up now to show you all, but it was good. It was, I think, accurate. Um, Let me get to it real quick. But for those of you that don't follow me on LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well. A lot of what I post there ends up being a similar post on as a blog on the website, a little bit more in depth on the website, or as an article on Medium. I also have Medium articles for those of you that don't know that. Let me share my screen here. I've got this post up, and we'll take a look at it. But it's yeah, like I said, ChatGPT did not disappoint. Is it this one? Yeah. So here we go. So roast of fresher data engineers. Again, we have all been there, right? We have all been in that place where we are new, where it. So we've all been here. The no hate here. It's safe space, but fresher data engineers out there be like, I've mastered SQL, right? You go through all these classes, you know all this stuff, and you're so excited to get out there and use it. You're like, I've mastered it. I promise you, even after 25 years, there are things that I run into that I'm like, what the heck is that? The first, especially every time I get into Oracle, I feel like I run across some new function that I've never seen before, or some new implementation of it. So yeah, there's always something new with SQL. Whether that be you're jumping into Snowflake for the first time, and Snowflake's got a ton of different functions that you could use, or you're jumping into Spark SQL for the first time, and there's a ton of stuff there. Yeah. Yeah. And again, like this says, just wait until your first query returns a Cartesian join, and it takes your production database down for an hour. Again, we've all been there. These things happen. Let's make this. Oh, it doesn't make it bigger. It just makes it smaller. Okay. I prefer Python over SQL. Of course you do. It is fun and it's cool, and you feel like you have a little bit more control over what you're doing. And that's all great until you are manually debugging a 5 gigabyte CSV because you did not optimize your pipeline, or because you missed some piece of transformation in your Python script that you didn't see because you completely relied on Python to do all your EDA. For those of you that don't know what EDA is, it's exploratory data analysis. You do it as you're pulling stuff in and trying to figure out a new data source. Next piece is, I could build a data warehouse. Absolutely. You could go out there and create a new SQL server or a new database, and your naming conventions are going to be all over the place. And it's going to look like somebody just went, a 5-year-old just went and came across your keyboard and rolled across it, or your cat did. Yeah. And so many times you'd see files named final. I swear this is my last. I deployed my first pipeline. Congrats. Now go explain why it's throwing nulls everywhere and only runs when the server reboots. All right, my code works on my local machine. This is a big one that we all have used at some point. And we all say it works fine on my machine. There's so much stuff that works fine on your machine, and it's all great until you put it into some type of environment that that's missing a library that maybe you have on your machine that's not out there, or something inevitably happens. So why do we need indexes? You go through school with smallish data sets. You Things are clean and pretty and pristine, and you know all of a sudden you get into the real world and you're dealing with tens of millions of records in tables, and you're running stuff and it takes 45 minutes to run because somebody dropped an index that they thought was not important. And then here's let's not forget the confidence. Walks into meetings with 5 Stack Overflow tabs open like they're carrying the weight of the world. And but yeah, you are not seasoned until you have 20 open, and don't sweat it at all. So again, it got this from ChatGPT. It was entertaining. Yeah, use a select star in production. Please don't use select star in production environments. I ran into I worked for a group one time that exclusively created a view for every production table that they created that it was select star. And you run into issues when that's what you do. But yeah, some groups exclusively do this. I would recommend not using that. But freshers definitely do. But again, hey, no hate here. We've all been there. And then the real growing happens when you realize that everything's not a one-time script. Nothing you do is going to be a one-time script. You realize that naming conventions are definitely a form of art, and you accept that backups are your best friend, or time travel is your best friend. And when I say time travel, for those of you that don't know, there are systems like SQL, like Snowflake, where you could actually go back and look at what a table looked like an hour ago, or 5 days ago, or 10 days ago. So time travel, if you don't know about it, go out and check it out. It's super cool. When you accept that backups are your best friend, after the first oops, I dropped a table, one of the great patterns that I've seen out there is when you make any change to a table, you put it into a rollback schema and you keep it there for 6 months or 18 months. And that way you have a backup of the schema of that table, you have a backup of the data, and you could restore it if you need to. But yeah, oops, I dropped a table in production is a gut wrencher for sure. And you learn the true meaning of it worked on staging. Yeah, there's a ton of things that I've done that worked great in staging or worked great in dev, and then you get it into production and it doesn't quite work the same because something didn't get replicated in dev, and that is something's a little bit different in production because somebody changed something in production and didn't tell anybody or something like that. So look out for it said look out for the next roast on seasoned data engineers. I'm gonna have to do one on seasoned data engineers next, and that should be interesting as well. So yeah, meetup plan in the future. Yeah, we'll have to do that. That'll be awesome. All right, so I hope you all have a great week. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for talking to me and chatting with me live, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. Have a great week. No more questions. Have a good one. See y'all. Thanks, guys.